What's up, guys? Welcome back to OverTakes. This is Misfit, and today we are recapping Week 10 in the Overwatch League. We're going to go over some of the key matches that happened, talk a little bit about those, talk about the seedings in the tournament. We're going to do some team takes before we head out. But first, before we dive into all that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me. All of your support's greatly, greatly appreciated. If you've been here for 1 day or 5 years, thank you very much. If you're new, checking me out for the first time, I do Overwatch League content 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what's going on. We're going to have a little break here between episodes. I'm going to be setting up a new system, so we're at a good break point here. We're going to do the recap, and then obviously at the end of the week, I'm going to be doing my tournament overview, picks, brackets. In the meantime, I'm going to figure out a way to get some videos up in between these matches because they're all week next week. So we have Monday till Sunday. So I'm going to try and do a break point. They are late at night, so I can get something up in the midweek probably, maybe after the first round and the second round. We'll overview that, get a little bit into the losers bracket and all that stuff. But we're gonna get some stuff done. We're going to talk about the matches and, of course, obviously talk about the finals. But that's next week. So let's start talking about Week 10. Okay, so final week of Midseason Madness qualifiers. We're going to talk about what happened in the East first, go over that, hit the West, and then go into the tournament seedings and all that. So going into this week in the East, we had the two teams left, chance to get in or out. That was the Fusion and Chengdu. Everybody else is playing for seeding and all that kind of stuff. And we were talking a lot about Chengdu's improved. They're playing better. This is their kind of meta. And the Fusion were kind of we're on this 1 week up, 1 week down. Don't know what's going on with Fusion. They did not play each other this week, but Fusion came out and took care of business. I was critical of them a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Mainly, I felt some of the stuff that they were doing, and it's fairly obvious. There were some issues with the DPS, a lot of, to me, not bad play necessarily, but some of this kind of justicing, as I'm starting to call it, what Washington does. The justice, that is. You got guys making big plays, but there's no cohesion, no anything going on to get together where, you're making these big shots. There's no go into a fight, like a MN3 or Zest makes a big kill. Or you're relying on Zest to do something. Or you're relying on MN3 to do something. They were way more cohesive and looked way better this week. Yeah, okay, first match they played Guangzhou. But they did take care of the Seoul Dynasty pretty easily. Granted, 2 of the 3 map wins, maybe all of them, maybe you could even say, MN3 was playing like a freak. He was not missing a shot. And some of the shots he was taking weren't exactly easy. He just went ham. But they still took care of Seoul. A not very close match, honestly. And I gotta hand it to them. They beat Seoul bad, you could say. I mean, yeah, like I said, on the back of MN3. But they got things together. They took care of what they needed to take care of. And Belisariya played a lot better. Their support line played good. Aim God looked fantastic against Seoul. They were just doing all of the right things against Seoul. And Guangzhou doesn't count. That might have been the match that they needed to kind of sort some stuff out before they had the big match with Seoul. But they came, and to me, the more experience this team gets, and I said it in the beginning of the year, Philly, the more experience they get. Now, I have been concerned about their play and stuff, but it's growing pains, it's cohesion, and some of the stuff I talked about last week with just some of the amount of practice and things you can do right now with the 15 iterations of the game that are out there. You don't have time to play as much Sojourner as you want. Yeah, you can go play her on the second beta in a quick play match or whatever. But, ranked ladder, as much as we rail on it, for some of these guys, this is how they learn heroes, get better, improve, and some of that stuff. That side rant aside, Philly looked way better this weekend, and I was impressed with some of the stuff they did and how they did it, not just on the back of a DPS player, whether it be Zest or MN3. Yes, a lot of it was MN3 against Seoul, but the thing is the cleanup was there in those fights. The engagements were there. You had a lot of factors going in here that, to me, looked like it was definitely some coaching going on there, and it seemed to have worked out pretty well. Now they're going into the tournament. They didn't have to worry about anything too much either after Chengdu lost to Shanghai. And a lot of the things reared their ugly head like we were talking about. Leave does leave things. He takes over matches, but if you can kind of keep him under control, Jinmu's way easier to deal with because his hero pool is smaller. He did play some good Tracer this weekend, though, Jinmu. I will give him that. He looked way better on Tracer. But the overall factor here is you have nobody to sub out. So you don't have the person that, all right, we want to run Rush. They can play the Mei as well. Or they can do this. Because you don't want to put Leave on Mei. And they're more of a dive-centric kind of team anyway, but you see where I'm going with this. You get Leave on and Sojourner Ashe, which is way more prevalent. I can't wait to see that in the tournament. The Ashe versus the teams that are running. West seems to be running Sojourn and Hanzo, occasional Ashe, and with smatterings of other things in their Sombras, and usually Desperation Sombra is what it amounts to. Or Genji. It's more like the Ashe and or the Hanzo, depending on what side of the pond you're on here. But back to Chengdu. It's a glaring problem. The rest of their team looks pretty decent. And I'm not saying Jinmu's in there playing bad, but you have to build comps around what he can play. So it limits your flexibility, his lack thereof. So some of the stuff they could have done if they had a Prita there is non-existent. Where, you might run a Prita and Leave all the time, potentially bring Jinmu in situationally. But instead, unfortunately, with the money circumstances and all the stuff they have, they can't. And I'm not making excuses for them. It's just easily remedied by a team, or easily taken care of, I should say, by a team like Shanghai, who has upped their game. I wouldn't say it's not they were terrible, but they did not look like Shanghai. They did look like Shanghai this week, though. Lip and Fleta were insane. Fate on the ball all weekend long. Fate drove them last year. Void is very key and was a huge part of that. But I think as a driving force and a shot caller and a leader, Fate is a little bit better at that stuff. And I think that helps out a lot. And there's a comfort factor in there with him in there. Void too, but when he's playing ball, they know they engage better with ball, to me. It feels like when I watch them. They know what his playstyle is. It's hard to figure out what a solo Sigma does right now, or a solo Diva, or whatever you're running, with Void. You know how Fate is going to operate on Wrecking Ball because it works similarly enough than it does with a solo off-tank, to me. But Shanghai looked better. Chengdu lost an opportunity to go, and I think depending on what happens, what patch they play on, and all that kind of nonsense with whatever they're doing with the game, that has to be probably their best chance to get into a tournament, in my opinion. Unless we continue the situation where they can get close. I just don't know. Hangzhou also picked up their game this weekend. They ditched the Architect thing. Chang'un didn't Chang'un this. With massive roster substitutions. They played with what has been working and what's good. And, they looked far better. I had them losing this week to Chengdu, and they buried them. They just drove them in the ground. And basically their roster has way more synergy the way they were playing. So just keep it the way it is. You don't need to change it up. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Hangzhou looked better. Do I think they're going to make big noise in the tournament? No. I think they could do a couple of things. It's going to be interesting to see, and we'll talk way more about that later on in the week. So the East was very interesting this week. We got our teams in, and the 4 teams from the East are kind of where we thought they were. Looked like Chengdu had a shot. The way the Fusion were playing, the way the Spark were playing, they looked kind of off. But we got the 4 teams from the East. We got Seoul, Shanghai, Hangzhou, and Philly. So they got their representation in there, and it was pretty much like we thought. There was only one team in question whether they'd get in or not, and that was Fusion. And they took care of their business, and late, most of us woke up to Shanghai beating Chengdu, so we knew the lineup early enough. The East was very fun to watch. It was chaotic. It was crazy. But let's move to the West, where this weekend's matches did not seem like they were going to be anything really of significance. And a lot of the ones that we kind of considered to be washes pretty much were. San Francisco took care of business. Atlanta took care of business. easily enough. Gladiators did, I predicted them 3-0 to beat the Mayhem, and they did. But when you get teams, Houston fans, you're not going to like this. When you get teams that play up and down to their competition in matches of great importance, such as the Houston Outlaws, the Justice were already out. We'll get to that thing in a minute that happened. It makes for interesting matches that shouldn't be. The two matches, yes, you could say New York has improved, but I beg to differ after watching them play Boston. And Boston, I would say, is improved after watching them play Houston and burying New York. But for the love of God, just dominate somebody that's below your pay grade, so to speak. Houston, you drive me crazy. New York is not that good. Did they look better? Yes, because you have Gangnam Jin and Yaki playing on their best heroes. That works for them. The rest of it, the cohesion, the direction, the over-aggression, the stupidity at points of where they're positioning and stuff is just maddening. New York, this is. Houston, same thing. You almost lost to New York. Boston gave you a fight that you should not have given them, even though they are improved. Merritt, playing the Sojourn, is the savior right now. Pelican had a good match too, but goddamn, if it's not for those two guys in a couple of these scenarios, they would be fucked. I mean, Merritt got the first, Railgun 2 collateral, basically a 3K with one shot off against Boston to set the tone in the match. I mean, that was like 10 seconds in. I was like, well, Houston's come to play this week. Nope, they let him back in the match. But Boston did play better. Some of the matches were absolutely hot garbage, and what the fuck was going on? That was half of the time when I was thinking. That match, Houston and New York, was a shit show. I barely believe it was professional Overwatch at times. Like I said, there was a couple other matches that were better played, but were worse scores. The London-Dallas match was a fantastic match to watch, but Dallas played better. Except for when they C9'd a whole map away. But, what's with the C9s too? For God's sake, guys, go review how to play Overwatch, please. Because I was railing on Houston. Dallas, you did worse. You did 3 times in one map. For God's sake. The map that London won, Dallas C9'd 3 times on Gibraltar. They were bad C9s too. They almost, you could consider 1 or 2 of them, they were close C9s, but it was like 1 person versus 4. All right, I'll give you that. You can't get to the point. You're not going to get there anyway. On the whole, the Dallas 3-1 was better than any of the 3-2 matches that went on. And fight me. I mean, yeah, if you like shit shows, sure, they were great. But like the one match of the weekend, though, in the West, now that I'm on a West ramble here, and I'm not an APAC apologist. I just like good Overwatch. I don't care where it's from and what heroes they're playing. I like a little bit of difference. But that Vancouver Justice match, I don't know what that was. Once again, professional Overwatch, I don't know. The tone was set in the first map on New Queen Street. When Vancouver couldn't really do anything, they built up ultimates, and they took I think it was 60, 80 meters they ended up going and winning the map. Like, Uber and Mr. X were fantastic in this. Uber was just, fucking get me out of here. I don't want to cast this match anymore. Vancouver was absolutely dreadful at times. And so were the Justice. I mean, you had Circuit Royale. You had Mirror, who couldn't get out of his own way. I mean, playing Genji, getting headshot, just running out into the open. Like a fucking plat player. I don't know. There was one situation where I believe it was Falls trapped himself, essentially, as Sigma in a fucking side room, and he's getting like all this focus fire at him, and everybody else is dying because the fucking shield that he has, he has to use it on himself, and he won't leave the room. It was just horrible. And then you have just spaghetti flying all over. They didn't even bring spaghetti to this. This was like, this was just not even breadsticks. You didn't get any breadsticks in this game either. This was terrible. And, sometimes, and a lot of it, I know I keep repeating this, is the amount of time you can grind is limited when you're playing one iteration of a game that's 3 iterations away from one beta that's out right now that you can actually play, and a totally different game than the other one that's live that you can play that actually has ranked, and people are actually tryharding or whatever they're doing on there now, playing Roadhog, whatever's going on in ranked. It was a very sloppy game. I hope to God Leg Day has time and makes it. Oh, there's no replay viewer. Never mind. When he does those like lowlights things, this would be the match. I wish he could go back and they'd let him do it. Just give him the replay viewer. Let him into the production booth. Let him do his thing. And I want that for that match because that was a travesty of Overwatch. Professional esports got set back like 20 years from that match. Maybe not 20. It's not quite Houston, the Houston toilet bowl match. It was at Houston-Boston a couple years ago. Was that 2020? Yeah, it's not quite on that level, but it was damn close. And Justice fans, you got to worry about this team a little bit and the direction. So someone needs to explain to me. I understand the comp. Krillin is literally owning, first picking everybody on Zenyatta in this match. I'm talking way too long about a meaningless match, but it was fascinating. And the last map you put him on Brig. I kind of understand it from a X's and O's standpoint of you're going with the analytical side of this. Brig would work better. But if you have a guy playing that hot on Zenyatta and he's discording and killing somebody, usually the Tracer or the Genji, who are your biggest fucking problems, yeah, you might want to keep him on that hero. Just throwing that out there. As Uber said, I believe he said something to the effect of, that was a professional Overwatch match. Oh, it was just brutal. Brutal times there. So anyway, on to matches that matter. Houston struggled this weekend. I wouldn't call it nerves necessarily either. All the important matches happened, and the teams that I had London in the Dallas match, I thought they would play a little bit better, but you know what? They played fantastic, Dallas. Back to that match a little bit, even though, C9's aside. Other than that wackiness, Fearless upped his game a little bit, playing some Doom, playing some ball, looking pretty comfortable, looking pretty good, played a little Winston here and there. But when you get Sparkle on Genji, that's a game changer. And, just giving him resources and feeding him and letting him do what he can do on that hero is smart. They're kind of figuring out what works for them in this meta. And, getting players that can play, and him playing with Edison, because Edison looks pretty damn good on Sojourn as well. When I saw some of the Sojourn they was playing in this match, it looked good. And, London played really well. They didn't have nothing to hang their heads about losing that match. They played good. Dallas just played better. It kind of helps you figure out where London is. Yes, they're on a 5-game winning streak. They're good. They might be better than the Mayhem and Toronto right now in that middle mix-up, mash-up area. I don't think they're quite on Atlanta's level. They could probably give Atlanta a better battle than maybe Dallas or the Glads. They've already played them once and beat them, but they improved. They look good. They got their synergy. This team plays together fantastically. This is one of the things that, everybody talks about with Overwatch is the cohesion. London's got that. They just got to refine some of their gameplay, maybe get a couple more comps. They're looking good. They had Hottie playing some Winston. You got Poco in there occasionally playing, I'm going stage wide here, or a tournament cycle wide. This winning streak that they had. They just look fantastic. And I like the direction of this team, where they're going. Christopher's a fantastic coach, and they're playing well. And if you're a Spitfire fan, this is more than you thought was going to happen this year. This is fantastic for you. You got, I wouldn't say more than you bargained for, because you root for your team. You think they're going to do good. But, question was, why'd they bring Hottie back? They cut him. He obviously has done something with his game where he's been coached. Whatever's happened, he seems like a totally different player this year compared to last year. Maybe it's the guys around him. He plays with them better. Even though he was on a team with most of those guys last year, from the Hurricane. But this group seems to be together like some of the stronger teams in the league. It's just they need to get a little bit better, improve a little bit more. I think we're going to see some good things from the Spitfire coming up here. Even after this tournament cycle, because a lot of people were concerned with them coming out of a situation where they could run rush a lot. And if that was can they translate that into some momentum going into this stage and run some other stuff? And they have, and they do. So they're looking pretty solid to me. Now, two of the teams that slid into the tournament on the West, Toronto and the Mayhem, did not look good at all this weekend. They cannot hang with that top 5. Right now, the Mayhem and Toronto, probably the closer they come is because a team has to come out on top is beat each other. Because right now, I don't think they could beat either one of these teams. I don't think they could beat the Glads, the Shock, Dallas, the Reign, and Houston, probably 5 maps, both of them, at this point. Toronto beat Houston in week 2. Toronto looked a little bit stronger at points. Houston was trying to figure out some other comps. There was a lot going on there. But Houston still went 5 maps with them. And I think London's on the level, if not better. Right now, if you ask me right now, I think London could beat both of these teams too. So I think these two teams, Toronto and Mayhem, are right where they should be. Maybe not should be. They're positioned themselves. They're the we don't suck, but we're not on this level kind of gatekeeper right in the middle. Toronto has a lot more issues than maybe the Mayhem, you could say, from a quick eye test. But if you dig deeper, Mayhem's got some stuff. I think they listened to too many people that called Overwatch 2 deathmatchy because they play it that way and they're getting figured out and it's not working. The good teams just annihilate them because they know what they're going to do. Toronto's still trying to find some footing. New coach, maybe not a different style, but the West was an interesting, wacky, weird week this week. For once, APAC was the stable region where you got kind of what you bargained for, what you thought was going to happen, minus the Seoul game, but that was a decent enough match. You had guys popping off all over the place. The West looked like a circus, a clown fiesta. There was like 3 El Clasicos this weekend, and one of the ones we thought would be wasn't. Boston just destroyed New York. Absolutely annihilated them in the last game of the weekend. Okay, so that's my overview of the week. Now let's talk about tournament seedings. All right, after everything shook down, all the dust settled and all that, seedings as followed. We have essentially kind of a play-in round. Everybody still gets to go double a limb, though. So even if you get knocked out of the first round, you just go down to the losers round. We have that. It's a full-on gigantic tournament starting on Monday. We'll obviously spend a lot of time on this at the end of the week and hit it at points next week. I might do some quick episodes, just go over a couple things, maybe give match picks mid-rounds, etc. till we get to the end. Never had this big of a tournament in Overwatch minus the playoffs, but here we go. Here's the seeding, and these teams all have a bye. First 4 teams. First, we have the Shock. Second is the Gladiators. Third, the Dynasty. And fourth, the Dallas Fuel. Right where we thought everybody could be. You might have had a shot at having, if they didn't do what they do, Fusion might have been able to get up there in the top 4 for the whole tournament cycle. Spark as well. Spark had a really decent shot, but they kind of screwed it up at the beginning of the tournament cycle. But I think these 4 teams are the 4 best teams right now in the Overwatch League. All right, now let's break down. This will be on the first round of matches. Those teams we just talked about have byes. So 5 through 12. Matches are all set, too. 5th, we have the Dragons. 6th is the Outlaws. 7th, the Spark. 8th, the Spitfire. 9th, the Reign. 10, Fusion. 11 Mayhem, and 12 Defiant. Matches go as follows. Here they are up on the screen. Here's the bracket. So we have first match. Now this is going to be the best match. Maybe, well, in the first round, there's 2 good matches in the first round, in my opinion. First one, we have Spitfire taking on Reign. That's going to be a fantastic match. That's going to be followed by the Dragons taking on the Defiant. Then the other really good match, I think, is going to be the Spark Fusion. They've played each other a couple times. They've gone back and forth. I think Spark won once and Fusion won once. So, and both in pretty big washes. So, and this is an important game for these two. We'll see what happens. See if the Fusion can handle it. See if the Spark can handle it. It'll be interesting to see. I'd say Outlaws Mayhem could be an outlier good match, depending on if the Mayhem can get their shit together and play as a team and not 5 guys running around playing deathmatch. But, so that's going to be the tournament setup. All right, before we go, we're going to do a couple of team takes. I didn't do everybody, but here are my team takes for week 10. Fusion look like they should look like. They played like the Fusion this weekend, and that we saw in the first 3 games and in that tournament. They were playing with some cohesion, direction, and they played like they wanted this. They went in and they took care of business, pretty much stomped the dynasty. But I like what I saw from the Fusion. Shanghai, continue to roll. Fate is the key player. I said this last year, and I will say it again. Fate is more valuable than people give him credit for. He's really good, but as far as in the server, in the matches, but the leadership and that kind of stuff that you don't talk about or see or notice, that's the stuff that Fate brings to this team. And they're going to be scary in this tournament, I have a feeling. Because essentially, in my opinion, they have a free win against the Defiant. Hunters, unfortunately, they need more DPS. And they're not going to be able to get it. They look good. They sustained a little bit, but then it just fell apart this weekend when some of the things that we thought that could happen, happened. You start to figure out Jinmu, know his hero pool, you know where they're going to go with comps, so you can kind of practice a little bit more. Yeah, you know, every team's got their style, their whatever you want to call it. Unfortunately for the Hunters, they have the financial situation. Houston Outlaws continue to play to the level of their competition, but they're still winning unless it's a top 3 team. Basically, what I've been saying about them, when they play the Gladiators, they play decently. When they play Boston or New York, they play like shit. But they still manage to win against the lower level teams, which is working out for them. I do like this team. I think there's a lot going on. You got guys on heroes that they can all play well. Piggy's looking better. You got Dante doing the Doomfist thing. Your DPS are popping off left and right. But that's what I think about Houston. Boston, with some work, they could be decent. I saw some things from Boston. I thought they looked pretty good this weekend. They still have some holes and some gaps that they need to fill and work some things out. But I think I like that lineup with Punk playing tank. Yeah, it limits your hero pool, but some of these guys are starting to learn a lot more. They're starting to realize that having 15 tanks isn't a good idea. Some teams can roll with 2. I think they should roll with Punk. And Valentine looks good. Crimzo looks great. And they have pieces that they can work with on this team. London, good, but not quite there yet. Gatekeeper. I have 3 Gatekeeper teams. I know. I wouldn't call them a Gatekeeper team like the Defiant and the Mayhem. I think they're a tick above them right now. I do like the way they're playing. They play together as a team. I talked about their cohesion. Hottie's great. You bring in Poco spots to play Sigma. You got a nice DPS rotation. Supports are playing really good too. Okay, and the last team I'm going to talk about, Dallas. They always do better with time. They just need time to get their footing. Unfortunately, all these games count. But they're still the 4th seed because they figure out what they can do and then they go out and they execute really, really well. Good coaching, good players. They end up with decent results. I think it helps too when you get guys like Sparkle on Heroes. They're fantastic at. You got Edison playing decently on Sojourn. You've figured out maybe this stage we use more Fearless playing the Doom and the Ball. And then Spot put in Hanbin for your Sigma duties. It's working out well. And I think they have a good opportunity to keep rolling. And even though they start shaky in stages, they're getting into the zones where they like to be. These guys like to play in the pressure more than not. And I think we're going to see some good stuff from them coming up here in the Midseason Madness. But that is my team takes for Week 10. And you know what, guys? That's going to be this episode. So we talked about some of the matches, what happened in the league. We got the tournament all set, ready to go. Get the brackets ready. First round matches are up on the board. Second round, we have to wait and see because it's not a normal tournament. They get to pick who they want to play, the top 4 teams. So it's going to be a fun, interesting week coming up. Tournaments here. We're going to have some time off. If anything happens, obviously I'm going to do something as best as I can in my transition of equipment. I got everything saved on hard drives and stuff like that. So it's going to be fine. I'll be able to get it up, but you guys have done this. You understand the turmoil of switching systems and all that stuff. But I'll have it ready. We'll have some episodes come up in the end of the week. We'll talk about the tournament. Get ready for that. That's going to do it, guys. Thank you all for joining me. All of your support is greatly appreciated. I really do mean that. Whether you've been here for 1 day, 5 years, I really appreciate all of your support. If you're new and made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you very much. If you hit a like, hit a subscribe, do all the YouTube jazz, that would be fantastic. We'll get more people in here, get us up in the algorithms and all that. More people in, we talk more Overwatch, makes it more fun. All right, guys. This is Misfit, I'm out. Everybody stay safe, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you on the next one.